All right, we're up, we're running, we're good to go. 2021. Hey, this is actually, I was just thinking about it. This is actually the first one for 2021, or is it? No, second one, first one. I have no flipping clue. 2021 started. Welcome to another Wiser webinar. This one's going to be an interesting one because we are going to have a long conversation about to phish or not to phish. We're going to look at it from the tech standpoint, the human standpoint, the psychology standpoint, the neuro standpoint, and all sorts of other things. As always, sponsored by the folks over at Wiser, and Gabrielle's actually joining us for this one as well, so that'll be kind of fun. And for those of you that are listening in and hanging out and watching our ugly mugs on screen, we will be keeping an eye on the questions. We will be having conversations with everybody, so feel free to ask away. And with that, I'm going to shut the heck up, and I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. Ladies first, please, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. My name is Shayla Treadwell. I'm the Executive Director of Governance, Risk, and Compliance at ECS Federal. I also own a security awareness company, not trading, awareness company named Syncia. And what's interesting about me is that not only do I have an InfoSec background, very used to anything that deals with the second line of defense, whether it's integrated risk management, things of that nature, training and awareness, but I also am an organizational psychologist. So the human element is the most important element for me. And that's how I'll be approaching this little talk that we're having today.
Awesome. Thank you and appreciate it. Doug, you're up, sir.
Well, hello. Doug Meyer, Director of Information Security and Data Governance at Gordon & Reese, LLP. We're a nationwide law firm in the United States. I manage the information security program and in its many aspects, including our phishing awareness program. And that's part of what we do.
Did we let a lawyer in?
I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV.
Awesome. Ayman, you're up, sir.
I am Ayman Elswa, founder and chief vCISO at Cloud Security Labs. I help startups get their security programs leveled up and in place. And so happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Alexander, sir, you're up.
Hi, I'm Alexander Stein. I'm an expert in human decision-making and behavior, and the founder of Dulles Advisors. So we advise CEOs, boards, and senior management teams in organizational issues, but with complex psychological underpinnings. And I am a trained, licensed, and accredited psychoanalyst. So I joined Shayla here on Team Human, and am always emphasizing the psychological elements of why people do or do not do what we expect them to.
Awesome, thank you. Gabrielle, sir, last but definitely not least.
Hi, I'm Gabby, CEO and founder of Wiser. So this webinar is a result of us at Wiser working on rebuilding our phishing simulation. And Chris, we've been working hard on new templates, and we had a lot of very interesting discussions. So we wanted to share some of our things we spoke about with everyone else, because there's a lot to consider when thinking about phishing. So I'm really, really excited about this webinar.
Cool. Well, we might as well leap into it with both feet. Let's be honest. I mean, the first question that we chucked up on the website might as well be the first one that we actually go through. So, phishing employees, is this a good thing or is it not necessarily a good thing? And then we can explore the yeses and whys and heres and nos and all those kinds of things. I'm actually going to start with Ayman, if you don't mind, sir. And then we'll go Shane and we'll bounce. Yeah, I'm putting you on the hot spot first because you got the human stuff. And we've got two other humans, and the rest of us are basically apparently a bunch of legal folks and a bunch of geeks.
Yeah. I have a lot to say on this topic. So yeah, my approach is, if you're going to do a phishing campaign, don't set your employees up for failure, right? So we all know that the big justification that people say why they should do it is like, oh, well, the attackers do it. Well, yeah, that's true. The attackers do it. And so are you preparing them if an attacker does do a phishing campaign? Do you have them, do they know what buttons to press to report a phish? Do they know where to send, is there a security ad or is there a phishing email for them to notify people of a phishing you know, a campaign, things like that. So if you're going to send a phishing campaign, you know, they need to be prepared on what to do. And then of course, definitely stay away from like certain topics. I've seen some failures myself firsthand of people sending bonus emails during, you know, end of year, and people's feelings got hurt. And I would recommend using a lot of empathy and emotional intelligence in your, you know, because sometimes, I mean, you got to put yourself in their feet, right? And I'll defer to the psychologist for that. But you know, like using a good amount of emotional intelligence and empathy, and just compassion for them. You know, at the end of the day, you're trying to educate them and have them do better, and you're not trying to like get them and bait them out there. And my 1 minute is over.
Shay, go for it.
Okay, so this is actually a very interesting question and get asked all the time, and I actually am a fan of phishing your employees. However, I will say with the caveat, if you're going to do it, you have to do it right. If we're going to use phishing as an awareness activity, then I believe very strongly that you should do it. We all understand that phishing is still the #1 way that our adversaries are actually getting to our various networks, so therefore it's something that we should be worried about. However, if we use it as a red teaming activity, I don't agree with that. Don't red team your people and then punish them afterwards. So especially when it comes into building punitive repercussions for those who do end up falling victim to phishing simulations and things of that nature, I want organizations to really think about that. It's not something that I encourage. However, I have worked with organizations and I've built 3 programs for people who could potentially even lose their job after clicking on a phishing simulation. However, I put a lot of onus back on the security team because we have to ask ourselves the question, have we done everything possible to ensure that our people know what's right and what's wrong? Because I have worked with a lot of douchebags that turn around and say, you know what, I know it's a phishing email, I'm gonna click it anyhow because I work on the security team. That's not cool. So you kind of do need to be punished for that kind of stuff. But at the same time, when we're looking at holistic enterprise-wide phishing programs, I think it's a good thing, but don't even touch it if you're not going to invest the people, time, or effort in order to doing it the right way.
That seems to be a common theme, and it's something I definitely would want to dig into. I'm actually looking through. Gabrielle put a post out about this last week, and I'm hoping Phil is floating around on here somewhere because I want to have a conversation with him about it. I'm actually gonna. I'm in your camp, but I will play devil's advocate a couple of times in a minute. First, before we hit devil's advocate stuff, Alexander, if you don't mind, sir, go for it, because I want to see where your thoughts are on this too.
So the webinar is teed up by its title, a great lead-in here to look at what Prince Hamlet might have to say about cybersecurity and phishing, right? So what comes next in that famous soliloquy of to be or not to be? To dream, perchance to dream. There's the rub, must give us pause. So he's not just being risk averse and he's not just indecisive. I would say in this context, he's talking about consequences and specifically the unintended consequences. And, you know, to the points that are being made, if you're going to implement any kind of tool, which a phishing test is, you have to know what is your purpose and what are the outcomes and how can you manage what those outcomes may be. The other thing that I'll say in this brief introduction is that it's critical to make a distinction between situational awareness, which is typically what cybersecurity teams are thinking about, and self-awareness, which is really the operative human function, psychological function or mechanism that's at play in terms of what people are doing and what they're aware of or not aware of doing. And the phishing test itself does almost nothing to assess or address self-awareness. And that's a missing link here in the whole system.
Got it. I actually, Gabrielle and I had this conversation about Hamlet. Gabrielle asked me to edit the original title and topic for this one, so we had the to be or not to be one. I put a post out, and actually I ended up doing a techie version of like the next half a dozen lines of the soliloquy as well. One day I actually want to go through that whole damn soliloquy and geek it out just for fun and games, but that'll be one evening when I'm trying to avoid doing work on other things. All right, so we've got the question I was looking forward to that came in from Doug. I'll hit you in a sec, but I'm going to hit you with this one. We got the question that came in on this one. Bad guys aren't nice. Bad folks don't care about your emotions. They don't give a flying fudge bar as to whether you are or aren't going to get the bonus at the end of the year. GoDaddy being the perfect example on that one. We'll hit that one in a little bit. They don't give a damn about whether the cat died, the dog died, or anything else. Their job is simply to get you to click the damn button, no matter how and no matter what they use and what mechanism they use to do it. In doing so, how close do we have to get to that line to try to educate? How do we balance this? It's a really tough one. Doug, I'm going to throw this at you. It still goes back to the to phish or not to phish, but how close to that line do we have to get? And then how much education do we do before we get to that line, and can we get to the line? All those other good things. Go for it, sir.
Yeah, well, first response is we have to do a lot of education when we're rolling out or continuing a phishing program to be respectful to our employees. And I think part of what I'm hearing so far is based on an assumption, at least somewhat, that phishing programs are 100% effective. And I have yet to see proof of that. Yes, they do reduce the risk, but, and here's my point, security is a business. As a CISO, that's my point of view. We have to show value, and it's really tough to show value of when you're trying to quantify risk avoidance. So risks avoided, we can try to quantify it, but it's really tough. I think the trade-off, unfortunately, for having a very effective phishing program like you're talking about, Chris, we really, take on the role of the bad guy in the pursuit of making the business safer. The unfortunate result is that we end up alienating our employees. And I often say this, attorneys and staff at my firm do not come to work to be phished. They come to work to make money for the business, to settle court cases. They also don't come to work to do two-factor. They don't come to work to have their passwords reset on a rotation basis. We do a lot to sort of chafe at our perspective as security pros, and I think we've got to look at that too. And it's one reason why perspective of us generally is not great, is one reason why our tenure usually is only from 18 to 24 months at any particular organization.
Here's a thought on this one. I'm actually so let me counter on this one. I would agree-ish. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it really was, everything fell on our shoulders. No two ways about it. The security, the passwords, the identity, the access, and everything else. Then some bugger came up with these stupid things called telephones that have all the functionality of a small computer that can do absolutely everything. And we handed them out like candy. We still hand them out like candy. And we've done it without any warning signs. We've done it without any education. And we've done it in the assumption that the poor users are like, oh, I know exactly how to use this, and I know how to keep myself safe online. The challenge I feel today is security is everybody's responsibility. You're right. Your legal team come to work to get the shit done to do it, but as part of that, they have to be responsible and respectful of their client's data, which means they have to understand how to protect it more effectively, especially in this day and age. And that means understanding 2FA and everything else. It also to me means that they have to understand they're a target. Let's be perfectly honest. You've got people like me who are advocating stop attacking healthcare systems, stop attacking and go attack the lawyers. Go beat the crap out of the lawyers, because the lawyers have got more information. The lawyers have got these treasure troves of tons of data that, quite honestly, as an adversary, I'd love to get my hands on. And so to me, every single person inside that organization has to understand they're a target, and how do we convey that effectively? And that's part of the whole awareness, as well as the bigger thing about security as well. Gabrielle, I'm going to throw it at you, and then we're going to do a bit of a round robin fun thing. We're getting a bunch of questions coming. So Gabrielle, go for it.
So look, criminals have no mercy, right? Like, they can go far and beyond, like even the examples that I will give now, and we just can't. They will probably always have the upper hand because they have no mercy. They can send sextortion emails. I can't imagine doing that to employees. So we can't actually simulate
We need to do one of those. We've got to. Please let me put a sextortion one together just for shits and giggles. I want to see how
Well,
HR
you can
blows
create a
up on it.
template and we can put, made by Chris and,
Yeah.
But here is the thing, like we probably have our red lines to all of us. And what eventually happens in many cases is that we train employees to detect a specific vendor's phishing templates. And they're very good at it. You can see that employees, oh, there's a phishing simulation right now running. They can spot that. They know how to distinguish the simulation than the real thing, because the real thing is like more, it's higher level than what we can do sometimes as vendors. Chris, we worked hard writing those templates and we were ruling out, we had some nasty ideas and we were playing around with them, but we just couldn't. Yes, we can. We know how to write those templates, but there is a point where we say, this is too far. And it was actually very, very, very hard. And I think we succeeded. It was very hard to come up with phishing templates that will still get people to click, but are not, won't harm people on a personal level, because that's where I think the red line is. And I know that, what, my time is run up. I have more to say, but I'll say it,
we will circle back through everybody. There's some really good questions. All right, so let's take a step back. Let's take a step back from this for a second. We know, well, we hope that in the most parts, people do the phishing campaigns for education. But why else are we doing these damn things? Are we using it for metrics? Are we doing it for anything? Are we doing it to justify our existence? Are we doing it to justify the bad guys are continuing to attack us? Are we doing it just for the pleasure of abusing the hell out of the users? Why are we doing this? Why do we continue to do this? Alexander, I'm throwing this one at you first, sir, if you don't mind.
I wish that I could speak for the reasons why they do it. Maybe then I would have more influence over changing the course of things. It does seem to me that by and large, the test is to see what people don't know rather than to understand what they do know, and then to help them build on what they can know better to mitigate the risks and make fewer mistakes. So, just to circle back to one element that we passed over a few minutes ago when you talked about how the attackers are not interested in people's emotions. So I think the refinement that I would add to that connects to what we're talking about here is that attackers don't care about people's emotions, but they're only focused actually on people's emotions. That is the centerpiece of social engineering, is the manipulation of people's emotions. That is what a stressor event is, and that's why it works. And so part of the trick here is for organizations to help all of their users and their workforce understand more about how they respond emotionally, rather than continuing to disconnect emotions and cognition as if, we all have cognitive mastery, and if you learn what you need to know and not do, then that's the end of the problem. It's actually only a piece of the situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anybody want to follow on from this? I'm throwing this one open to anybody that wants to hit this one. I want to look at why. Why do we do this? Shea, go for it.
The easiest why that I can think of, just because I live in this world, is because people told us that we have to. I'm just being so serious. So from a compliance perspective, I don't care what you have to adhere to from a regulatory perspective, or any prescribed framework. Awareness and training is going to be included. So a lot of times we do stuff just because people say that we have to, and people think it looks cool. And that's the honest to God truth.
God, I hate it, but you're so fucking right on this. You're so right. And this is what pisses me off. Okay, to that exact point, if I take you aside once a year and say, don't click shit, don't send shit, here's 3 examples, you'll remember it for a few days until craziness happens again, and then we're screwed. And then it's useless. You've got the tick in the audit box and the compliance box, congratulations, you can feel good about yourself, but that's it. It's worse than useless. It's that false sense of security. And this is, again, this is why I love hanging out with Gabrielle and the team, is the whole continual shenanigans of like, okay, let's continue to educate and help people. All right, Eamon, you were going to hit on something on this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. So one, sometimes your boss expects you to do it. So, say you're the new CISO and your boss might be the CEO or CFO or whoever it may be, and they expect you to do it. Like, hey, why haven't you done any phishing campaigns? And you're going to tell them, well, we shouldn't be doing. So that's one. But two, I think, there's a big lack of data metrics that we have in security overall in general. We struggle with like measuring things, and so doing a phishing campaign helps us measure something. It might not be the right thing. It might not be the the thing, but like we are there's a drought of data in our just day-to-day stuff. So it's tough. It's tough. So I think that's why, to touch upon why we do things, we're just grasping for things. Now, if we were a little more wiser, we'd understand that the main goal is to educate people. So hopefully you've done the education before you've done the phishing campaign. And heck, if you've done a good job, maybe you'll warn them, hey, then in this quarter, we're going to do a phishing campaign. And you don't need to phish them every quarter. I think that's like just kind of, that's wild. Like, once a year, maybe, depending on the culture. Again, it comes back to culture. I wrote a whole article about this, and one of the things was understand the culture of your organization. Are you a bank, or are you like scrappy startup, or or somewhere in the middle? So just understanding your culture will help a lot.
Doug, what you got on this one, sir?
I'd say understanding your culture is very key for any security program in any organization. So piggyback on Emma's comment there, and I do believe that most phishing simulations that are running these days are fairly sophisticated in that they're generating the reporting that you can provide upwards and outwards, showing that you're reducing, in some measure, the phish prone amongst you, and you can do that by Active Directory groups and such. And so, I mean, we can show that it is effective. My point is the value proposition there? There's so many things that we have to do as security organizations. Time and resources is required to maintain an effective phishing program over time. So, I mean, we look at the balance of things. Spending 15% of our time on, or 20% of our time on a phishing simulation program means that we're not spending that time on something that's also going to protect and defend the company against adversaries. I believe with this comment too is sort of like this nagging question that's been in my mind is when somebody says, do you phish your employees? It's almost like they're saying, are you still kicking your dog? I mean, there is no good answer, right? I mean, because if you say there is a good answer, but if you say yes, then you're in a defensive position of saying, well, the reason why we alienate our employees on purpose is because good reason. But if you say no, and this is what I'm wondering about, you say no, can you also say the reason we don't is because we have more effective strategies? We utilize our phishing and email gateway effectively. We utilize in-context messaging to provide alerts. We recognize when somebody is getting an email from somebody they haven't gotten before, or where there's one letter off in a from address. I just wonder, like, I don't know the answer to this question of whether we should phish or not, but I do know that the feeling I get when somebody asks me, do you phish your own employees, is not a great one.
So I think what we seem to be hearing a lot, and this is actually, that's a really, really good point. There's a really nice message from Candice on here, and she's an advocate for the phishing, and I totally get it. I totally understand that. She's like, look, we've taken our vulnerable employees, those that continue to click, from 20% down to 4%. Great, love it, totally awesome. But that's still 4%. If I send out 1,000 messages, 40 people are going to click. That is now 40 front doors that I can walk straight through. If that is your sole or that is your primary defense, you're screwed. You might as well just pack up shop now and just hand me the keys to the front door. Because unless you assume that somebody is always going to click something, unless you assume that the big, hairy, nasty ass thing is already inside your organization, and you still sitting there with that perimeter, this whole thing, and we've had these conversations before about this, well, I've got my perimeter, I'm going to defend it. No, you don't. No such freaking thing these days. Doesn't exist. Have a nice day. I'm already on the inside. How are you going to know? So for me, it's less about the phishing stuff, and it's much more about the education. To me, this is the stuff that Gabby and Al we've been battling back and forth, because he's right. We put some nasty ass phishing messages together, and he's like, can't use those. I got nasty shit. I will tell you that your kid, I'll do my research and I'll tell you that your kid's got problems at school and you need to download this report. Or I'm going to tell you your significant other's in hospital for all I give a damn. You'll click shit as far as I'm concerned. And that's not the example. I want you to learn. I want you to ask more questions, which means I want to educate you first a lot.
Yeah.
It's a ton.
Just want to add to this.
Yeah, go for it.
Also about the goal, like you said, like the 4%. Is the goal to get to 0? If yes, at what cost? As ruining the company culture. So there's also an ROI at the end of the day for for trying to achieve that target. We just have to put realistic goals for ourselves. Like people will, some people will click. Doesn't matter how much we teach. Just like their car accidents, like we cannot rule out car accidents in this world. Like totally, just can't.
Can I just hop in right there quickly?
Totally.
This is where I struggle, because a lot of times, well, there's a couple of things. One, from a risk perspective, when you're mitigating any risk, you're never going to hit 0. That's the end of it. You're always going to have a percentage of people that are either going to get in or click or do something. So we can't mitigate the risk away. The second thing is, from a phishing perspective, we focus so much on the click rate. I don't care about the click rate. I personally care about our resiliency rate, because the more education that I can put out there, thus the reason why I say you have to build the program the right way, that means I have more people reporting something suspicious than I have people reporting that they click something or not reporting at all. Therefore, if my resiliency rate can be higher, I have a more protected environment holistically. So when I am doing a phishing simulation, the one metric that I'm looking at the most is how many people are reporting that something is weird, to make sure I SOC know to go look into it. So I like, that goes back to the whole metrics conversation, where am I looking at metrics? Am I looking at KPIs? And from an executive lens, I think the executives want to understand how resilient their organization actually is.
So if you're going to do that, then my next question is, how often do you do it? I'm actually reading through some of the questions in here, and Eamon, you said once a quarter, maybe too much, but I've got people in here that are saying, hey, we do phishing every week. We're cycling through people, we're phishing every week, and that's a ton. I mean, that literally is keeping everybody on their toes. So let me ask this question. First question to everybody here. If I said, hey, we're running a phishing campaign, we're going to run it every single week. Too much? Not enough. Give me, anybody can say this. Go for it.
Way too much, way too much. You're not keeping them on their toes, but you're serially traumatizing them. and essentially their cognitive capacity is going to plummet, right? So because if you normalize incursions like that, basically you're bullying your workforce, and they're not going to think better or respond better. They're going to acclimatize themselves to the normalization of a horror show.
Interesting.
How many people does that team have that they're doing security phishing? I mean, do they have everything else in place? MFA and non-admin access on all their laptops, and how big is this team?
I'm asking him now.
Yeah. And I actually would agree completely with Dr. Stein over here. Every week is too much. I would actually recommend monthly. If you're going to do something like that, we do understand that I believe you have to encounter something at least 12 times before it becomes a habit. So you have to do it frequently enough that it becomes habit forming for them to do the behavior that you want to. But I'm a big proponent of positive psychology. And within the positive psychology model, there's a such thing called flow. And with flow in that model, the goal is to balance anxiety and boredom. If I phish someone too much, they get too used to it, they become bored and they're not going to pay attention. If I don't phish enough, but then have like some type of repercussion, if you get caught, you cause anxiety, and you don't want that in your organization. So you actually want something in the middle that keeps people in that flow of being cognitively aware at the same time it doesn't disrupt their work. So it changes based off of the culture of the organization, back to Doug's point. But once you understand the culture of the organization, you can define what that actually is for you.
do me a quick favor, because I was bashing a quick answer back. How many times, because I've actually got a PowerPoint slide that goes into like how many times we have to nicely beat people over the head before it sinks in. What was that number that you said? I totally missed what
I
yours was.
believe I believe if you look at research, it's between 7 to 12 times.
Yes. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that what I'd written down was what you say, because it's, yeah, and that's, which is to me is fascinating for the people that like do phishing like once a year. I'm like, so it's gonna take 7 to 10 years for you people to figure this shit out. If you're lucky, and if they retain it from the past 7 years, yeah, you've sunk, you've failed. Why bother? All right. Eamon, you are all ready to talk.
I am, but I think Doug wanted to say something.
Go for it, Doug.
I'll go after him.
Well, I'll just throw in really quick. The 4% that you mentioned, Chris, that you just can't get, you know, you can go for the lady or whoever was running a phishing program, they got them 24%. That 4% could be much more dangerous, could be just as equivalently dangerous as the 20%, depending on who it is in the company, if it's a managing partner or if it's a chief marketing officer. So that's the danger of the numbers that we show. I'm not to say that phishing programs aren't effective. They are. It's been proven. But is the cost in terms of alienation and worth the effort? And also, one last thing, the greatest risk we face in terms of external social engineering isn't through a phishing email, isn't through an attachment or a macro or a dubious URL. It's somebody doing their research and sending an email pretending to be somebody else or somebody they know or somebody they work with. And there's not, and it can be from a legitimate email address. So there's no phishing simulation program that's going to train you on that. And what we're doing and what we're planning on doing is making our most vulnerable and most high profile targets very cognizant of the fact that as a law firm, we have a roster and it's out there on the internet that people are looking at you and they're thinking of ways to manipulate your social network to get to you. And it won't come through an attachment or a dicey URL.
So that's perfect, because that leads into this. Hang on a sec, Gabriel. This is perfect because it leads into this. It's back to that question. We've always done trust but verify. Bollocks. No more of that stuff. Verify, and then maybe I'll think about trusting you. You know, we had one, Gabrielle, you pointed this one at you, when the CEO, you know, sends you the message, hey, I need 20 gift cards. Get on with it. Do it right now. God damn it, I need it this very minute, or else.
Yeah.
Call the CEO and go, hey, look, I just want to go for it.
I just want to add to, you know, I had this idea. I don't know how to actually make it a product, but I had the idea that, you know, we also need to check just the processes. So if something legitimate is happening, let's say the CEO asks the CFO to transfer funds, a legit transaction, not like a bogus one, can we somehow check that the actual CFO followed the process and call to verify with the CEO? For example, like, can we verify that the processes that we have are working with, and that, I don't know how to do that, but that's something that I think, you know, we need to just make sure that the processes are working.
So I think that's a good one. So basically, my perspective, let's talk about the operational part, right? You mentioned perimeter, but there's also the concept of zero trust. So, and culture. So all this can tie together. So for example, first of all, a lot of people are getting phished all the time anyway. Okay, so there's enough phishing emails coming in, actual phishing emails. So one, are they reporting it properly? So do they know which button to press? There's actually a button in G Suite and or Workspaces and 365 where you can report a phish, and that's going to help the providers to prevent more of these emails, right? Do you have DKIM and SPF set up properly, right? 365 has a spear phishing category where you can put executives in this category and they'll have extra protection. Are you doing that? Like, do all these things first, right? And set up the infrastructure so that we can reduce the number of phishing attacks to begin with. And you know, I saw one organization set up a Slack bot so that if someone reports a phish, it would just like, there's a bot that would actually walk them through a process. That's awesome, right? You know, you could also search if someone does report it, then you can search all these other inboxes and remove these things, right? So do you have all these processes in place to remove nasty emails from people's inboxes. But then on the other side, if your organization is like, hey, give everybody admin and whatever, and you are struggling to reduce your attack surface, you're like, well, I'm going to have to do some phishing. And so see, and prove, I'm just kind of being devil's advocate here, and prove that one phish email I can get, and this is a red team part, Chris, I'm appealing to you, and you're trying to make the case, we need to have less admins, we need to have less admins on their laptop, all that kind of stuff. And you're getting pushback. Well, you need to prove somehow that, you can do it. And maybe even just do a full, do a red team. Say, I'm going to do a red team. I need to get green light for this and prove to you, so.
No, so I get this, and this is where this day and age, a lot of us have said, okay, let's play Dungeons and Dragons for business. Let's sit down and do some tabletop exercises.
Right.
Again, if we take, Candice had an amazing thing on this. Look, I've taken it from 20% down to 4%. If I know that Alexander's organization has got 100 people in it, I know 4 people are going to click. So let's toss a coin, figure out which 4 people have clicked in my tabletop exercise of D&D, and go, okay, those 4 people clicked. I have access. I own their computers. What can I get to? The nice thing about that is it's not an adversarial discussion. I haven't embarrassed any one of Alexander's 4 people. All I've done is I've basically gone through and said, here's what we think, here's this. And as long as both parties come to the table willing to have those discussions, it's faster, quicker, simpler, easier, less hassle, and also less confrontational. And we still end up at the same discussion points. Okay,
no,
so here's
an idea. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yep, I'd take a step back on this one for a second. So there's been a bunch of questions on here. Doug, I'm going to hit you first because I'm just going to hit you first. There's a bunch of questions on here where people have said, okay, look, we've got people that continue to click. They continue to do this. What the hell do we do about them? I'm just going to leave it right there. What do we do about them?
Yeah, no, I think you cordon them off, and for a second tier or a third tier of remedial training.
Can I taser them?
Yeah.
Go for a share. You were wanting to say something. Gabrielle, I'll hit you afterwards, I promise.
I shouldn't have laughed about tasering people. I'm getting better. No, I think that the thing about it that's so interesting, if you have people that keep clicking, that's when your training and awareness team really needs to kick in. Whether they need additional training, if they need a webinar where they're going to have to sit there in attendance, or if you can activate another control, you can stop them from having access to the internet. They can't have any external internet access until they've earned their trust back. You can do a lot of things, but if you see someone who habitually clicks, that's a danger to your organization, and that person is the danger, and you need to make sure they're taking it seriously and put some controls in place to make sure they get the education they need.
Alexander, give me some thoughts from your side as well. And Eamon, I'm going to hit you up as well if you don't mind.
Yeah, so have to go back to care and emotions. So, one of the first things you need to determine for the person who's just chronically clicking is why? What are you thinking? What are you not thinking about? You can't just, cuff somebody's hands behind their back and expect that they're going to stop clicking. They're just going to use another part of their body because there's something else driving that behavior. And, one of the issues here is that there's this enormous divergence that occurs that drives a kind of institutional mindset that overlooks the complexity of human decision making. And I understand that, trying to solve problems at scale means that you can't necessarily put, every person's mind on the couch, so to speak, to understand why they do or don't do everything. You have to be able to capture everyone as a group. But still, there's this aspirationalism at play in which sort of the zero failure point pivots on, if we do this, it's like a silver bullet exercise. If we get people to not do this, everything will be great. But the problem with that is you're never going to do that, to Shea's earlier point. You cannot get risk to zero. And so the system needs to accommodate the reality of who people are and how they behave and how they think. And that has to include tremendous variability. It cannot be homogenized. And that means that, you know, whatever is happening that's causing 4 people out of 100 to click, you need to start by understanding what's going on for those 4 people and then extrapolate that back out to the 100.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I would say more on the why, just like Dr. Stein said. You know, put your product manager hat on. Gabriel, you might appreciate this. You know, put your, you know, be problem oriented and not so solution oriented. Find out what the problem is. Schedule a Zoom call with that person. Why not? Like, get on and take that extra mile. Like, you know, a lot of times security folks sit behind their email, sit behind their, you know, we want to avoid the ivory tower, you know, whatever it is. Like, you know, if your employees think the security team live in an ivory tower, then you have an issue. You have a cultural issue, and you need to even not think about phishing campaigns. You need to step back and get, you know, talk to the people. So, you know, go the extra mile. Have those better bedside manners, right? Like just be that better person. Kick up that empathy and find out why. I mean, maybe they're having a bad day. I don't know. I don't know why, you know, and if you have to, then we could talk about controls, but you know, find out more about the problem before you go to the solution.
I think the controls is an interesting one. Hang on a sec, then Gabriel, I'm going to hit you because I'm going to assume we've all run into some folks in the C-suite who think they're above phishing, who think they shouldn't be part of it, or somebody in manufacturing who's like, oh, I don't ever need this. All I do is get my hands greasy and mess around with machinery. Why do I need to worry about this shit? And so that's great, and I love you, which is where your lack of trust. And I'm going to build a couple of extra bunch of little controls around you so that when your ass does get it handed to it, it doesn't take the rest of the company down with it. Yeah, that's unfortunately sometimes all we can do. Gabrielle, go for it.
So let's call employees people for a second, because on a personal level, people get scammed. Some people are scammable just by nature. They are repeatable victims. We see that with romance scams, and we see that it depends because of this why. People are addicted to love, people are addicted to gambling, different things. Some people are not curable, unfortunately. Seriously, like some people, or it's too much to invest in order to actually. So you either take the thing that makes that thing happen, like the internet, you put those controls, or maybe they are not fit for that specific role. But we cannot, like going back to this zero thing, not everyone is fixable, and we will always have that percentage. And we just see that again and again with, you know, regular people scam, you know, like it's the same thing at the end of the day. It's the same emotions that people are addicted to.
And I think at that point, you know, back to the good doctor, to Shea and everybody, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I'll do what I can to educate you. I'll do what I can to lower the risk. And if I can't, then I'm basically going to, if I still want to retain you, and there is a big if in there, definitely. If I still want to retain you, then I have to build a set of controls around you so that when you fail, it doesn't take everything else down with it. All right, who was about to talk? I apologize. I kind of missed who it was. Doug, was it you, or did I miss somebody else?
Yeah, I apologize.
Go for it.
Yeah, it was me.
Go for it.
So you can hear me now. We take an apologetic approach to our phishing simulation campaign internally. We're out there saying, look, we know this is what you didn't come to work. You didn't come to work to do this, but here's the risk and here's the benefits. And we also end it with anybody can be phished. So if you happen to click on a link, we're not going to shame you. We're not going to guilt you. We're going to probably reset your password if it was a real phish click. And if not, and we might advise that you go to one of our free opt-in training games to learn about the various kinds of phishing that are out there. But taking pains really to be as apologetic about it as possible, to take yourself out of the ivory tower that Eamon mentioned, and to sort of develop some amongst the employees, some awareness that we aren't the ivory tower bad guys. We're just trying to protect the company. And that message of no shame is really important, because I get it, in the hallway or in a message that, hey, that was a setup, that was a speed trap, that was a gotcha. And our response is not, too bad, this is going to happen again. Our response is, yeah, I know, sorry, anybody can be phished. Thanks for taking the extra training. We appreciate it.
So here's one thing, and I love that, but I'm going to add to that, which is I honestly don't give a shit about the company. I care about you, the human. If I can help you learn, if I can help you protect yourself, if I can help you educate yourself to look after you, the kids, the grandparents, the parents, the friends, and the relatives, that bleeds through to the company. So for me, it's humanizing even more. Again, I'll give Gabrielle some kudos on this one, because that's why I love doing the stuff that we do, which is it's kind of fun because it's all about the human. It's not about I'm going to protect the company. If I educate you, the person, you will inherently, you might step up and think more, ask more questions in our digital realm. You know, you figured out as a kid to look left and look right when you cross the street. Now I'm trying to educate you to do exactly the same in the digital realm. That's all I really want you to do. You know, and how do we do that more effectively? That's really what it comes down to. Man, there's a bunch of questions. Oh, where do we want to go with this? Where do we want to go with this? There's so many questions. I'm actually going to throw it open to each one of you just for the minute while I run through some more of these questions. We have a ton of questions. Alexander, go for it first, and then we'll wander on.
So I actually just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying and underscore how important it is when you can amp individual self-awareness that does propagate out, not just to the ecosystem and the organization, but to the individual pods, in essence, like going back to teaching kids to look left and right before they cross the street. It's not just about alerting them to the fact that there are dangers, but it's about how you stay safe. You know, it's not just about warding off bad things. It's about how do you move forward in your life in a healthy way. And you know, that is something that's going to carry over to all kinds of good decision making and good judgment, not just, you know, don't click here and don't click there. And to this, I would add, in response to your question, how do we go about that? The incredible value of incorporating, just as a normal matter of course, multidisciplinary teams in organizations. You know, one of the problems that I see time and again, I expect Shea can back me up on this, is that, you know, these are decisions that are being made at the enterprise level by business people and technologists who have at best maybe a lay understanding of superficial psychology. It's enormously thick and complex. There are just so many different things that you have to consider, and it really would be, you know, the reverse analogy would be my coming in and telling a technologist, this is what you need to do with your hardware, or, you know, this is the policy that you need to do to develop control. I would be so far over my skis, you should just push me over. And this is what I encounter all the time in organizations where there are people in positions of authority and influence making determinative policy decisions about things that relate to what they think is going to be the consequence or the solution, and they actually have almost no idea what they're talking about. And that's a good area to start changing things.
That's a great point.
Go for it, Doug.
Well, I think along those lines, phishing simulation programs have a perception problem, generally speaking, and not all, but some do, many do. And I think the solution lies in starting to shift focus to empower, instead of shaming the employee, instead of gotcha the employee, to empowering the employee and developing a healthy curiosity in the employee about phishing, security awareness. Give them the tools to here and there jump in and do a 1 to 2 minute sort of self-education on the benefits of being highly security aware, of being highly aware of risk while online, of the bad actors out there who are targeting us because we have an email address at our company. And I think if we put it more back in the hands of the employee to be self-motivated, we will improve the overall perception of these programs.
Here's a question, and I'll ask this to everybody. Is this because phishing came out of our side of the world? It came out of the red team side of the world. It came out because it was an effective tool to use to get into a company. I mean, we'd be sitting there beating up against the web server and everything else, like, screw it, let's just go up against the human. It's more fun. Is that because it first started out as a tool basically of abuse? And it was born out of the fact that it was used to abuse people. And unfortunately, that mentality is carried on. No, people don't see it as a tool for education and for help. They see it because they remember from 20 years ago when they did get their ass handed because the big hairy thing decided to basically walk in through their computer. I wonder if that's a big part of it as well, to your point.
I mean, the fact is that 90%, up to 90%, according to some vendors out there, of attacks are from phishing. So it's just happening now, right?
Yeah.
So you can be conservative and say 60% or 70 or 80%, but that's my 2 cents on that.
The other 10% is coming from SolarWinds.
I think the other issue, this is what's interesting about phishing specifically as an attack mechanism. Not only did it come out of that cyber world, which is fairly new, we're going to keep seeing that it's like, what, 30, 40, 50, not 50 years old yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So so it came out of that world. That world needs ownership of something. Additionally, this is a business problem because companies are losing upwards to $1.5 billion a year holistically over phishing attacks. So when you have those two things coupled together, and then you start thinking about people, nobody cares about people. People, they care about money. So it kind of desensitizes the way that we approach this thing. And I do want to piggyback off of something that Alexander said earlier, talking about the person coming first. Any campaign that I run, any type of InfoSec or CyberSec campaign that I run, the first one that I do in any organization is about telling people that they matter the most. And I don't even talk about the company at all. I talk about ways to protect their network at home, or what emails to look out for when you're at home. Because what you'll find is that if people start having habits in their everyday life at home, when they're dealing with their family or their children and things of that nature, they're more likely to bring it back into the workplace. So if we could start attacking this issue that way by coupling appropriate awareness campaigns with it, what's interesting is that it sticks with people more, and you'll probably get more people receptive to it suddenly being not so much of a red teaming activity, but a true awareness activity, because I just protected your child or just protected your, parent from not taking $1 million from the Prince of Mesopotamia or something like that.
I love that. Yeah.
There's a great question in here. I freaking love it. Huge call out to M. Joyce. So what do you do if you do actually have a department that handles finances for Nigerian princes? And I'm just like, yes. All right, so there's a really good one in here. We talked a little bit about kids and crossing the streets and all this kind of stuff. Anastasia Edwards asked the question, what do we think about phishing programs in schools for training students? Where's our heads on this one? Do we agree on this one? Do we not agree on this one? And do we think it's a good idea? I'm going to save my thoughts for the end. Gabrielle, I'm throwing this one at you for a second, and then we'll wander around everybody else. What are we talking about? So we're getting there.
So I want to share something that, we do, and I think it also can apply to schools, because this is something that I was actually thinking about implementing in schools. So we have something called the phishing game. So unlike Phishing Simulation, where, we basically attack the people, a phishing game, everybody has to participate. They have 10 emails, half of them or a certain amount are phishing emails, others are not. And people and they know this game. They know that they have to identify the phishing ones. And hardly no one gets 100. So even though they are aware that this is, some of them are phishing templates, almost everyone fails at least, 1 or 2 or 3 or even more in this game. So for me, I love this game because, first of all, everybody participates, and it's not like a phishing simulation where maybe just 15% open the email in general. But implementing something like this with kids, I think, is much more educational than starting to attack the kids at school. Yeah. That to me sounds a little bit, too much. But if we do gamify it, I think there's a lot of value, because it's still not easy. Even though some of them are legit and some of them are not, it's still not easy to detect them.
Yeah, I mean, I remember ages ago we sat down and did the gunning for grandma stuff, so we're still building that out. That'll be totally cool. All right. Anybody want to add on to that one, on the kids one? Anybody want to?
Yeah, sure. I'll leap in. So one of the things that I like about the idea of that, so far as it's done, thoughtfully, and sensitively, is that as with learning to cross the street and look both ways and whatnot, you're really talking about personal safety. With children, especially digital natives, really the greater threat there is things like cyberbullying or some other kind of hostility against the child's person, not to an institution, right? So the child is going to be learning something about her or himself, about self-care, which is incredibly important just as a developmental tool and process. The other thing is to focus on education itself. So one of the things that I've done in my work with organizations doing cybersecurity programs and awareness training programs is to bring in ideas from child development and education to understand, what are the ways, what are the techniques in which teachers can engage disengaged students or children who are recalcitrant or aren't interested in learning or seem to be obstructionist to the curriculum or something like that. And there are a lot of well-traveled pathways there. They don't need to be reinvented by InfoSec personnel with regard to how to help people learn or how to help people become interested in something that they might feel opposed to. Right? So starting to bring this into the school system as a natural part of a curriculum will have an ROI, 10 years from now that will be, exponentially tremendous.
So you hit a really good point, which, hang on 2 seconds, you hit a really, really good point, which I think is, this is why I love having all of you on here. This isn't an InfoSec problem. These questions, these comments, these thoughts have been asked over the centuries. We've had to look after ourselves as humans. All we're now doing is translating that into a digital world. So it shouldn't just be an InfoSec. Somebody said, hey, HR should own it. And I'm like, actually, no, we should collaborate with HR and legal and compliance. This isn't ours. This is everybody's. Go for it, Eamon.
Yeah, so, some of the things I've come to discover by myself, I've come to like educational psychology lately, and in some of the work that I do, helping others like get into security in the podcast that I do, I've come to learn about neuroscience, educational psychology, and even in the work that I do with my clients, I've come to learn that as a security practitioner, you are an education professional, whether you like it or not. Your job is oftentimes to educate people, because I'll get pushback on, like, say, why should I do DevSecOps or DevOps, or why should I automate things? I'm like, okay, so let's walk through that. So it's amazing what Gabriel and Dr. Stein said. I would say let's take that education approach that we would take to a kid and use it on our employees as well, right? Create a safe space for them to ask that question. Create a safe space for them to ask that question, handhold them, but really focus on the education, and you're gonna win, at the end of the day, if you take that approach.
All right, so we are running up against the top of the hour. I actually just answered somebody who, I know this went really quickly. Somebody was like, we need to do this again. So I'm actually going to extend an invite to everybody here. I would love if everybody's up for it to get this group together again at some point. Probably in the not too distant future. Gabriel and I'll work it out because we've got a couple already, but this has been like stupidly fantastic. I loved all the conversations. I'm going to shut up and just, if everybody would love to give a closing statement, that would be perfect. Again, ladies first, please.
I think my closing statement, since we're at that top of the hour, I want to make sure people don't skimp out on the training and awareness programs. It's easy to make that someone's quarter of their job, but don't do that because you have to market security. You got to make people feed into it and believe it. So be comfortable marketing security to your company through phishing programs and even more. And think outside the box when you're doing it. So that's just my statement.
Well, Doug.
Okay, I totally agree with what Shay just said, and also your point earlier about phishing simulation programs being kind of checkbox compliance, and people have got them in place, but they're not really looking at them critically. A lot of advances have been made recently in the last few years in terms of what phishing email spam and email gateways can do, what Office 365 can do to sort of like be the front line of defense to fend off those phishing attacks, especially aimed at key employees. And we We can leverage in-message alerting to give people a context like, hey, this may not be who it purports to be. So I think that's one thing that we need to leverage is the technology itself. And then secondarily, what Gabe mentioned, the schools. Yeah, let's gamify and let's take advantage of people's competitive nature, especially kids, so that when they arrive at the workplace, they're very well informed, very wise, and very savvy about what is and isn't a legitimate email. The attack vector is going to stay there. It's going to get more sophisticated. You've already seen how much more sophisticated it is. So our challenge is to keep that security awareness program in place, ratchet it up in terms of like countering the sophistication of the attacks out there, and to not let go of that, perspective that we've talked about here of like, we're here to help. We're not here to shame. We're not here to guilt. And we're all in this together.
Cool. Hey, man, you're up, sir.
I think we said enough. We said a lot. So my only 2 cents would be watch this webinar again before you do a phishing campaign.
Big time. And the hundreds of bloody questions that came in that we're going to try and hit offline as well. It's freaking awesome stuff. Doctor, you're up next, sir.
I would just remind people that cybersecurity is a human issue that involves technology, not the other way around. And to take it back to Prince Hamlet, in answer to the question, to be or not to be, I would say unequivocally to be, and therefore please look both ways before you cross the street.
Awesome, love it. Gabrielle, sir, you get to wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I'm still on my way to this vision where security or online safety is a basic life skill. I think we did a little bit more today as well. This is why we're doing these webinars. This is why we're doing Wiser. So this is recorded. We'll be writing an abstract of this as well, and we will post it tomorrow. So I learned a lot of new things today, so I really enjoyed this conversation with all of you.
Cool, and I'll echo the same comments. Hugely appreciative. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Thank you for the time, and thank you for the amazing comments. Thanks to everybody in the audience. Freaking brilliant. This has been a fantastic one. Love you guys all. Stay safe, stay healthy, all those kind of good things, please. And take care. We will do this again.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.